of the Trump administration and what it means for you and your community, and how we can help stand in solidarity with our clients. Just checking and make sure people can hear us. If you can hear us, give us a hello, give us a like. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Okay. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about the various, some of the executive orders that have come out this week and my personal analysis of them. There's about 6 to 10 executive orders that affect immigration. We're going to talk about 6 of them. The first one being guaranteeing the state's protection against invasion. This executive order means that President Trump has declared an invasion at the southern border. Actually, maybe before I get started, let me tell you what our plan is for this Facebook Live. So we're going to go through the executive orders. I'm going to talk you through warrants related to ICE, and then we're going to be available to answer your questions about how this is affecting your community and how it's affecting refugees. So, let's start again. Guaranteeing the state's protection against invasion. So invasion was declared at the southern border through this executive order. No official entry is permitted at the southern border at this point. Any entry that happens after January 20th means that immigrant cannot seek protection under the INA 208, which is the section that governs asylum. So this means people who come to the United States after January 20th cannot seek asylum, according to this executive order. I will give you the big caveat that we think a lot of this is likely to be challenged, but we'll see we have to wait and see what happens. Immigration officers shall take any and all action to repel, repatriate, or remove any alien. So this means they're ordered by the executive order to do so, not that they are permitted to do so, but they shall do so. Okay. The next one is designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations. So this executive order designates certain groups like Tren de Aragua, which is from Venezuela, and MS-13, which is from Central America, as foreign terrorist organizations. This may seem like a great thing on its face, and I first read it, I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. But this is problematic because there's a bar in many immigration proceedings. It's called the material support bar, which says that if you provide anything of material value, housing, food, water, money, things like this, to a group that's a terrorist organization, you are prohibited from receiving any kind of immigration benefit generally. And this can be problematic because if the MS-13 owns the only grocery store in your area and you buy eggs at the grocery store, you've technically materially supported a terrorist group. So we think this is going to disproportionately affect our Mexicans, Central Americans, and Venezuelans in particular, and make them unable to access very needed asylum services. The next one that we're going to talk about real quickly, and I am happy if you guys missed this, we can go back because we got a whole hour tonight, so we can go back if we need to, is protecting the American people against invasion. So, the Biden administration's policy was to try to focus deportations on criminal aliens and recent arrivals. But this executive order essentially revokes that priorities memo and makes everybody, quote unquote, fair game to be removed. Though we do think there will probably be some targeted looks at certain groups. It requires registration of unregistered aliens. So I initially read this and thought, surely this can't be legal. But it is, it comes from a post 9/11 registration of individuals called the NSEERS program. So if you were, aware of immigration law at that time. There was a program. Now that program was shut down because of its inherently racist attributes, but it is theoretically possible that the registration would be required of unregistered aliens. There's actually a bill sitting in our state house right now that would require essentially the same. It allows the imposition of fines and penalties if the individual is here unlawfully. This particular executive order also creates more detention facilities. So right now in Indiana, we only have one detention facility. It's the Clay County Jail in Brazil, Indiana. But this would create more. Theoretically, it particularly looks at maybe creating some in the Plain States, in Kansas, and in that part of the world, Oklahoma. This executive order also deputizes local law enforcement to be immigration officers. Finally, it disallows the use of parole for individuals who, like our Afghans that needed immediate protection, like we've seen many times before. Prior to Biden's term as president, this particular use of parole had been used many times before, including by Eisenhower to welcome Hungarians. It's been used by many presidents, including during the Vietnam War, to welcome Vietnamese escaping from the Viet Cong. And more locally, and the purpose of Exodus is starting was Cubans, and it was used to help the Cubans during the Mariel boat lift of Cubans during Carter's administration. Okay. Order number 5 is called Securing Our Borders. It allows for the continued building of the wall at the southern border, allows and calls for the detention and removal of non-citizens, allows and calls for criminal charges against non-citizens. The Migrant Protection Protocols, more colloquially known as Remain in Mexico, is back. And there's no longer parole for Cuban, Haitians, Nicaraguans, or Venezuelans. Among some other just some other pieces there that are maybe less relevant to the population that Exodus serves. I will note that the southern border generally does not include Florida, so we're looking at California basically through Texas is what we consider the southern border in the United States. One executive order, which we already have victory on, is the protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship, which has already been stayed by a federal judge. That purports to end birthright citizenship for those born to non-U.S. citizen or legal permanent residents. It was challenged, the ACLU was ready for it, was challenged right away, and then it's already been stayed by a federal judge. We do not expect this to be successful. It would require a constitutional amendment because the Supreme Court has already ruled on what the 14th Amendment does and who it applies to. The short of it is that the president was arguing that individuals who are born to undocumented folks are not subject to the laws of the United States, but that's inherently not true, and the Supreme Court has already said so. In fact, if those individuals aren't subject to the laws of the United States, then I'm not sure that they're removable or deportable from the United States. And the last one that arguably affects Exodus and our populations the most, is called Realigning the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. So refugee admissions are suspended indefinitely beginning January 27th, 2025 at 12:01 a.m., so that's Sunday morning, and says that when and if the refugee program restarts, it will be on the recommendation of the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, which at this point is Kristi Noem, who's been nominated, and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, who has been confirmed. They're required to submit a report to the President every 90 days about whether resumption of refugees is in the interest of the United States. Requires a report until the program is resumed. And also says that states and local jurisdictions should have a role in determining the placement and settlement of migrants in their communities. Though important to note on this point in particular that CWS has already knocked this decision down. CWS, our affiliate organization, Church World Service, has already filed a lawsuit the last time President Trump was in office, and it was decided by a court that this isn't lawful. And President Biden had a particular focus on LGBTQ refugees and reunification of families, and unfortunately revokes that memo as well, so no more focus on protecting those Exodus and many consider to be our most vulnerable. So that's just kind of what we're planning to do, or what the executive orders are doing. I did want to speak quickly, unless there are any questions so far. Okay, great. No questions so far, but ask them if you want, and we can go back over it. Is the U.S., there's basically 3 kinds of warrants that you might see an ICE officer carry, and we will post these to our Facebook after the event today. But the first is called an administrative warrant, and this is a warrant that immigration itself issues, and it does say warrant for arrest of alien on it, but this is not signed by a judge. This is simply signed by an immigration officer. You do not have to let an ICE officer into your private place of business with this paperwork. So normally what we recommend is that an individual, if the police or immigration come and knock on your door, they knock on your door and you ask them to send the paper underneath the door, through the mail slot, something like that. If you see this administrative warrant, they do not have a right to enter your home or arrest an individual. If they have what's called a judicial arrest warrant, which will say arrest warrant, and it will have a signature from a judge, not just an immigration officer, that person it is in your best interest to let that person come to the door. Generally, I recommend that the person that they're seeking, whose name is on this warrant, come to the door and shut the door behind them so that they cannot investigate anybody else in the home or church or school. Then the last thing is there's also a search and seizure warrant. Search warrants have to have very specific addresses on them, so those will also be signed by a judge, but it says, for example, if we had a search warrant served here at Exodus and our address is 2457 East Washington Street. If the search warrant said 2456 East Washington Street, we do not have to let them in because the address is not specific to Exodus. And even more so, we would require them to have the suite number on our address before we would allow them to enter and look for anything. So these are really important distinctions and ones that we had a little technology snafu this afternoon, but we're going to make sure that we share examples of this with you, with your communities. And we do, we're open for questions. We want to be able to support our communities, our people who are who care and concerned about refugees. I think that's all I have prepared. Do we have any questions anybody would like to ask today, or shall I go through it again? No questions?
Nothing in the chat yet.
Okay. Can you all hear us? I hope so. Okay, great. Also, I'm sorry that I went through that kind of fast. That's what I get for having too much caffeine in the afternoon.
One question we've been getting a lot from the community, Rachel, is what kind of documents should someone carry with them?
Yeah, this is a great question. So if you didn't hear Cassandra, she asked me, we've been getting a lot of questions about what kind of documents a person should carry with them. This is a great question. So I would say, generally, if the person's here as a refugee or they have some sort of lawful status, like they have a green card or things like that, they should be carrying their work permit, their green card with them to show that they are lawfully present in the country. However, if an individual is not lawfully present or is in the process of obtaining lawful status here, it's my recommendation that they don't carry foreign documents with them, their passport, their foreign IDs, because one of the things that immigration has to do in order to remove somebody is prove that they're from a foreign country. If you hand them your Mexican ID, called the matricula, or a cedula, which is from Venezuela, or your passport, you've done immigration's job for them. You've just presented them with documentation that says, I am from a foreign country, and now I've done half of immigration's job for them. So it's my recommendation they don't carry that. Also advisable to carry the name and number of an emergency contact somehow, so that in the event that that individual is arrested, they do have the right to make a phone call. making sure that they have a name and number of somebody that they trust. It does not have to be a lawyer, but that person needs to be able to get a hold of a lawyer. The additional thing I'll say in regards to legal representation is, though all immigrants are entitled to legal representation, as opposed to in the criminal courts where an attorney is appointed to somebody, that does not happen in the immigration context. So you do need to be able to get a hold of somebody, an immigration attorney, and there are many great ones in Indianapolis, both in the private and nonprofit sector, I'm sure, who would be willing to assist your community members, your family, your friends.
All right, we do have a couple questions
Great.
coming in now. Can you repeat what the fourth executive order was?
Yes. So I think that is securing our borders. That's number 4 on my list, which, if that's not the right one that you missed, let me know, but we'll go over that one quickly. So securing our borders is the one that allows the continuation, the building to recommence on the border wall. It allows and calls for both the detention and removal of all non-citizens. It's the one that basically calls for operational control of the southern border. Allows and calls for criminal charges against non-citizens. It also makes migrant protection protocols, also known as Remain in Mexico, another pathway. Though this would require the cooperation of the Mexican government, and President Sheinbaum from Mexico seems less cooperative than the last guy. It eliminates the use of what we call the CBP-1 mobile app, which allowed individuals to schedule appointments to come in to seek asylum. Also ends the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Venezuelan parole program.
All right. Another question that came in, are any current refugees settled by Exodus in any danger?
So the good answer is no, not at this moment. As opposed to what happened last time when there was a travel ban and refugees got stuck, Church World Service and the Bureau of Populations, Refugee and Migration kind of preemptively didn't put anybody on a plane ahead of Trump's inauguration, because we were kind of concerned that that might happen. So our clients, there's nobody in limbo, though our clients are scared, concerned about their families. Many of the difficult conversations we've been having this week at Exodus have been related to telling people that it may be several years before they're reunified with their family. So they're safe in a physical sense, but I'm sure that they're very, I can't imagine how incredibly difficult that is. I can empathize, but I simply can't imagine.
What about Afghan families who came to Indianapolis back in 2021 and 2022?
So we feel pretty confident that those individuals are okay. Many of our Afghans, especially the ones at Exodus settled, nearly all of them received legal services from Exodus, and I would say about 90% of them are either on their way to green card or already have their green cards, so that's great. We think those individuals are relatively safe. There was news Monday that 1,600 flights for Afghans were canceled Monday ahead of the president's inauguration. So we are concerned that there's some families that will continue to be separated, and that's extremely disappointing. We've walked alongside these individuals for a long time. I myself actually went to I went to Fort McCoy to welcome refugees as or welcome Afghans as they were getting off of the planes there. So I feel this story deep in my soul, and I know that there are families that are going to continue to be separated. We do think this is an area where you could call Todd Young's office. He's a military member or a former service member, and maybe encourage them to allow Afghan family reunification to continue.
So if a refugee is here legally, but has been charged with a crime, what concerns should there be about them being stopped by the police? And then there's a second part to this question.
Okay.
Should they apply for an Indiana ID, or should they not, because Indiana will do a security check from DHS when they apply?
I think it's a little hard to say exactly what the concern would be, though with the passage of the Laken-Riley Act, there is some concern. We're not quite sure how that applies to refugees. So Laken-Riley is going to be sent to President Trump's desk to be signed into law, and it's a law that says an individual who's accused, charged with, or convicted of a theft crime is subject to what we call mandatory detention. So they would be subject to detention if they're convicted of any of these crimes. So I think it honestly is We don't know exactly. It's kind of a changing game, but I think that we have to be cognizant of when they are potentially charged with a crime. Generally, I don't think there's a lot of risk for an Indiana ID, unless, I guess in this case, we're implying that the crime maybe occurred before they were in Indiana or maybe occurred out of state. I'm not sure. But I do want to mention in this call that we are offering legal intakes at our office, open to the public, Tuesdays from 2 to 4 p.m. You have to be here by 3:30 in order for us to see you. And then on Thursdays from 10 to noon, again, have to be here by 11:30 in order for us to see you. And generally, we take the first 8 individuals that arrive at each of those sessions.
All right. Can you give us any insight on the position of the state of Indiana as it relates to these executive orders, and if there's any pending state legislation related to immigration?
Oh, there is a plethora of state legislation related to immigration. The Indiana legislature has decided that they are in charge of enforcing federal laws. I say this a little bit facetiously. We know that immigration is solely a federal, in the federal purview. I am proud of Indianapolis and IMPD Chief Bailey for saying they are not going to cooperate with ICE, because we want people in our community to be able to call the police when something is happening. And IMPD and other police officers can't do that if people are afraid they're going to be deported when that happens. So IMPD has already made a statement. We're pleased with that. But I do think among the state, there is probably increased cooperation that's going to be happening between the police and ICE. And we can get you more information on some of those state house bills that we're real concerned about. So remember that in the process of legislature, there's many bills that are, I feel like we could do I'm just a bill situation here, Schoolhouse Rock, but there are many bills that get presented, but they don't all get hearings, and they don't all make it out of committees. So we're keeping an eye on it here at Exodus, which ones are getting hearings, and we're going to testify on the ones that we feel like are relevant to our clients and relevant and to the immigration community as a whole. And we'll be happy to keep you apprised of anything that kind of rises to the top in terms of the legislation that we're seeing here in the state.
So if someone has a green card, but it's expired, and they've already filed for renewal,
Yep.
Are they protected from these executive orders?
Yes. Okay, well, your green card expires, but it doesn't mean you're not still a permanent resident. It's kind of like if you're a U.S. citizen and you have a passport, your passport expires. Just because your passport expired didn't mean you lost your citizenship. So it's really great that that person has already applied for renewal. They should carry proof of that application. It's called an I-90, a receipt notice, something with them, maybe with their expired green card, if they still have it. But yes, that individual is protected. We are going to have to teach clients and community members to speak up for themselves and say, no, I have a green card, here's my proof. So we're working on some ways to help and teach non-English speakers to do that in the coming weeks.
What about those who are seeking asylum and have pending cases? How are they impacted by these orders?
I don't know. That's going to be my answer for a lot of this. I'm not sure. We want to encourage them to be cautious. So be cautious driving. This the old drive like a grandma thing. Don't speed. Make sure your taillights work, especially if we don't have a driver's license. We shouldn't be driving if we don't have a driver's license, ideally, but the world moves. But I just honestly don't know, and if I wish I had more information. If they have a pending case in front of the court, hopefully they're okay. Our biggest concern are asylum seekers who have been here less than 2 years, because one of the memos that President Trump enacted was something called expedited removal, which says that certain individuals can be removed without a hearing in front of the immigration court. This expedited removal, it has existed for a long time, but under previous administrations, it has been people who have been here less than 2 weeks and who are caught within 100 miles of the U.S. border. President Trump changed that last time and just recently to people who have been in the United States less than 2 years and are within the geographical confines of the United States. So individuals who've been here less than 2 years, those are the groups that's the group of people that I'm most concerned about.
Okay, so would we recommend that refugees carry an Indiana ID, and can minors obtain Indiana IDs?
To the second question, yes, they should be able to do so. It doesn't have to be a driver's license. You can obtain just an Indiana state identification. Yeah, I think it's fine for refugees to carry that, especially if they don't have their, maybe they don't have a work permit yet. The other thing is maybe carrying copies of some of their other paperwork. I hate for some of the paperwork that refugees come in with is not replaceable. Like, we get it once and then that's it. We can't replace it. I can replace an EAD. We can replace an EAD, meaning an employment document. I can replace a driver's license and state ID, right? So maybe carrying color copies of some of their other documents, though I really need people to stop carrying their social security numbers, because that's not a good idea ever. There's so much identity theft and fraud, and it is hard to get another social security number. Plus I don't know if y'all know this because you probably haven't lost your social security number that many times, but you are limited to the number of social security cards you can have in a lifetime. And I think that number is like 8 or 9. So please tell your friends, families, and community members to stop carrying their social security cards with them, please.
Wonderful. Let's just keep going. We got a lot of questions here. We're going to try,
excuse me,
everybody, just so you know, we're going to try to get to as many of your questions as possible. There's also been some questions about if we can post the names of the executive orders in the chat. I think what we're going to do after this, we had a PowerPoint to share with you all, but Facebook decided to not cooperate. So I think we'll add the slides of the PowerPoint as pictures on our page later so that you can scroll through it.
Yeah.
And that'll have all of the names of the executive orders, as well as images of those warrants, because we got a couple of questions about that.
Yes.
But one question is really just if we could talk about EO number 6, pausing refugee resettlement, and
Sure.
how that's going to impact refugee resettlement organizations.
Yeah, so the way we're interpreting this is that refugee admissions are indefinitely suspended. So we still have an obligation and a desire to serve the refugees that we've already welcomed. Exodus has already welcomed 306 refugees since October 1st, 2024. So that's great. That means we have 300 people that recently arrived that we're still serving. We intend to hold our obligation and continue to serve those individuals, and refugees can continue to receive services for up to 5 years after their arrival. So we still have a lot of work to do. But we don't think that there will be new refugee admissions for some time. We're not sure exactly how long that will be. We do know there's theoretically supposed to be a review every 90 days. So our first review would be around mid-April. So again, I'm sorry that I'm going to have to be like, I don't know, but sometimes we just don't know. So what we're focused on now are the clients that have arrived, and helping our clients who are waiting on other family members, making sure that they're, I don't want to say doing okay, because they're probably not doing okay, but that we're there for them and we're supporting them as much as we can. But it's not just Exodus's refugees, it's the whole refugee program. So I imagine Catholic Charities Indianapolis is in the same boat. Catholic Charities in Fort Wayne is probably in a similar boat. So we're just doing the best that we can.
All right, this one I think we lack a little context for, but I'll go ahead and ask because it kind of relates to some reactions people are having about ICE.
Okay.
Someone has a question that says they believe they heard ICE entered a place of business and detained someone without a warrant. This seems like it maybe happened in New Jersey. So I know we don't have full context for that story, but can we speak just a little bit about what ICE, again, might look like?
So ICE, if the business owner allows ICE to come in, they can do that. Sometimes what happens is what we call collateral arrest. So this is why it's really important if you do own a business or you're at a school and they're looking for somebody in particular, that person come. I know it's hard to want to be like, let them come to the door, but if they come to the door and they shut the door behind them, then they can't ask questions of other people that are in your facility. So I don't know exactly about this New Jersey story, though I have heard a couple similar stories from immigration colleagues. My guess is that what happened is they came looking for somebody, immigration, they were let in by the business owner, by somebody, and they said, oh, let me see your paperwork, and if that person wasn't able to produce paperwork to their satisfaction, that they may have been arrested by ICE. They can do that in certain circumstances, and it sounds like this may have been one.
All right. Is Exodus reaching out to recently resettled refugees to assure them they're safe? Or if we hear, I'm going to assume a little bit that you're saying if you hear they're worried, should we recommend that they contact Exodus for assistance and reassurance?
Yes. We're doing our best to reach out to all of our clients. We have many in our past, right? Like, so I can't guarantee that we've reached out to every single client, but we are doing our best to be available. We do have office hours, but also, they are welcome to call our front desk. Our phone number is 317-921-0836, and ask to speak to somebody if they're particularly concerned about something. But certainly our newly arrived refugees we've been reaching out to, and those waiting on family members we've also been reaching out to.
Could you just one more time explain the 3 types of warrants again?
Yes.
And which ones immigrants must respond to?
Yes, okay, so there are 3 types of warrants. One is called an administrative warrant. This is the one, administrative warrants, that immigrants don't have to respond to. This is paperwork issued by the Department of Homeland Security that says there's a warrant for this alien, and that happens every time somebody's placed in removal, but it doesn't actually function as an arrest warrant or a search warrant because it's not signed by a judge. An immigration officer can issue this with their own hand, and they don't have to prove anything before they do so. So we will post a photo of this on our website so you can see that, on the Facebook page. But those individuals, those you don't have to let somebody in. That's not a judicial warrant that requires the individual to be arrested. There is a second kind of warrant called a judicial arrest warrant. Typically those are issued by the district court, so it'll have a heading at the top that says United States District Court, and it says arrest warrant, and it'll have the person's name. The name has to be very correct, and that should have a judge's signature on it. And you should ask to see this before you let anybody into your building. Last is called a judicial search warrant. If you Google administrative warrant, immigration administrative warrant, these are the images that come up. So a judicial search warrant has the specific location that they're looking for somebody or something at. So this, again, like I repeated, maybe, I'll repeat it just for the sake of repeating it. If we were to receive a search warrant here at Exodus, and it said Exodus Refugee Immigration, 2565 East Washington Street, we would say, no, you cannot enter because our address is 2457 East Washington Street, and we would ask even that it have the specific suite number. So the address has to not just be kind of, sort of correct, it has to be exactly correct. And so you would want to make sure that you saw this. Again, ask for the ICE officer to slip it under your door or hand it to you without opening the door all the way. Review it carefully. And then the thing is, you don't want to be obstructing justice if it's correct, but you want to be making sure that everything on it is correct before you allow anybody to enter your building or your sanctuary or wherever.
All right, lots of comments of people saying that it's recommended to carry copies of documents rather than the actual document, and they just want to clarify that is what we recommend.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I would carry color copies though, so it's very clear, like you can see it really clearly. Better yet, if you could get like a notarized copy of a document. So if somebody wants to carry a copy of their green card, maybe seeing if somebody can notarize a copy, I think that that's fine.
All right. I'm going to just jump ahead a little bit. You mentioned one of the EOs ending humanitarian parole.
Yes.
Do we have any insights on what could happen to those who don't have parole but who have TPS, which is temporary protected status?
Yes.
For example, Haitians who might have TPS.
This is a great question. The short answer is we're not entirely sure, but at this moment, TPS has not been rescinded, and it's unlikely that Trump would be able to rescind that kind of unilaterally. What is likely to happen is those individuals, when the TPS expires, he will not renew it. So individuals, particularly Haitians that have TPS, they should be okay-ish. There was language that came down in a memo today that says that they're considering revoking parole for certain Haitians, Cubans, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans on a case-by-case basis. So, but I personally feel pretty okay about where we are with TPS, but that could change. And if it does change, we'll be here to let you know.
This question is interesting. Who's an illegal refugee? Is there such a thing? Are those who came to the U.S. on a visa and filed for asylum considered illegal? Should they be worried about the current executive order halting asylum?
Great. First of all, I'm just going to get a little bit on my platform and say I don't like the use of the word illegal. It's an infraction, right? So like if I definitely sped on the way to work this morning. I definitely am not illegal because I sped. So just going to say that. But to your point is well taken. Refugees inherently are not undocumented or quote unquote illegal. They are the most thoroughly vetted group that comes. So somebody who comes as a refugee through the refugee admissions program is by far one of our most secure groups that come. So we're not concerned about them at this moment. Individuals who come and seek asylum and have a pending asylum are not technically, it's basically they have lawful status, but they aren't legal. It's a little legalese nuance there, but those individuals potentially they are subject to some of these executive orders, unfortunately, those who come, especially even those who come on a visa and seek asylum. So we just have to kind of take it on a case-by-case basis. But other individuals, we don't see anything in the executive orders related to DACA either yet. So for our young arrivals, childhood arrivals, we don't see anything related to executive orders related to DACA quite yet. So also feel relatively confident that that group is okay for the moment.
Could you clarify if your legal intake process is only for Exodus current and past clients and not for asylum seekers who come from other paths?
No, we have made this decision to stand with our community and offer up legal services to the community as a whole. So not just restricted to current and past clients. The process is you come to the Exodus office on Tuesdays from 2 to 4 or Thursdays from 10 to noon. And we see the first 8 individuals. Our legal consults are free, though we do charge small amounts for the actual legal services that we provide. But that's all on a case-by-case basis, an evaluation. They'd be given an opportunity to meet with one of our immigration attorneys. There are 5 of us here, and we would evaluate their case, but certainly offer any consultations for free.
Could you just explain what TPS is?
Yes. TPS stands for Temporary Protected Status. And it is, so generally I'm going to kind of do it in a twofold way. Generally when we talk about asylum, we're talking about specific harm to an individual. So they want to harm me particularly because of this characteristic. TPS is more in existence for when there's generally bad country conditions. So we see it, we see it when there's natural disaster. So TPS was issued for Haiti initially because of an earthquake. We can also see it when there's war. We also saw it for a lot of West African countries during the Ebola crisis. So you can see it for war, natural disaster, or disease. And it's kind of this determination that, hey, it's not safe for those people to go back to their country, so we're going to let them stay here temporarily while the situation resolves in their home country.
Are legal services hours only for Indianapolis, or do they apply in the Bloomington office as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now they're just in Indianapolis, but Bloomington clients do have access to our legal services. You need to call the Bloomington office and they can, there's a little bit of a separate process. We do phone consultations with our Bloomington clients, so it's a little bit of a different process, but they are still available to them, just not in the walk-in traditional way, or walk-in way we have here in Indianapolis.
Is there any plan to change how we offer consultations in Bloomington in the future?
We are evaluating constantly. I'm a big fan of, like, if this isn't working, let's figure out how to make it work. And as the Director of Legal Services, I have a little control over how we do that. So we're just going to kind of see how it goes in Bloomington, and we'll decide if that's something that we need to offer in person. Currently, all my staff attorneys live and work in the Indianapolis office, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't potentially offer some in-person times down in Bloomington as well. So stay tuned to our website, and we'll definitely keep you posted if that's something that changes.
So we've had a couple of questions about how people can be supporting Exodus at this time.
That is a great question. Well, we have, if you are interested, you can buy t-shirts like this one here. We also have wonderful new yard signs that say refugees welcome. It's this symbol, and then it says today, tomorrow, and always. This is a great way to kind of show your solidarity in the community. We think, and we know that clients who see that feel more welcome here, so that's a great way to do that. You can purchase those on our website, and then you can come pick them up, or, you know, if you have a friend in the community, you know, maybe somebody could bring it for you, but we can work on that. Additionally, you can call your senators and representatives, especially locally, but also calling Senator Young and Senator Banks, I forgot his name for a minute, and let them know that refugee resettlement is important to you. And although we can although we can always count on the support of Andre Carson, it is important for him to also hear that refugee resettlement is important. So if that's important to you and you live in Andre Carson's district, it is important to call or email him and say, hey, thanks for continuing to support refugee resettlement.
All right, I think we have gotten through the bulk of the questions that we have. But I'll wait just another moment in case anybody has a question that maybe they've been hanging on to. We had quite a few coming in quickly, so if you didn't have a chance to mention your question, feel free to go ahead and continue to drop that in the chat. One thing I'll also add is as you're thinking about contacting your senators and representatives, phone calls are the most effective way to do so. But if for any reason you absolutely cannot make a phone call, you can always send an email as well. But what we've heard for many years is that phone calls are just very timely. Those are the things that people are going to, they're going to have to pick up the phone and they're going to have to respond. And Liz has added a comment in here saying we could also donate to Exodus.
Oh, of course, I forget the most obvious thing. You can also donate money to us. We would appreciate it. With the slowdown in refugee resettlement, and we will be, it's a hit to us a little bit, so we would appreciate any donations you can give to us financially. And then I think if you have other donations, you're welcome to contact our Director of Development if you have other donations. We also like donations of stock, those kind of things. If you have a lot of stock in something, like Apple, maybe. I'm just kidding.
And what about volunteering?
Oh yes, great question. So we do have opportunities for volunteering. All kinds of things. It can be one day you come in and you help us sort donations in our warehouse, or all kinds of things. So we do have a volunteer coordinator. Her name is LJ. Feel free to give us a call. I think LJ's information is also on our website, and you can get connected with that. We also, some of the volunteer opportunities can also be like teaching an English class to newly arrived refugees, or partnering with a refugee who's learning English. So mentoring a new refugee youth that's here who's maybe getting used to the school system. That's a big transition.
Someone asked us to share the phone numbers for the offices of our representatives. I'll just go ahead and say that we can also add that on our Facebook page. That's been in some of our recent posts, so definitely check our page, but we'll also add that in the page after this presentation. We've added both of our senators, and then we can provide a link where you can find your representative. It definitely depends on where you live. A couple more immigration related questions have come in. So given the recent executive order pausing the processing of asylum applications, will this affect my ability to file for and obtain an EAD on time?
Okay, so that's interesting. I didn't read the executive order as pausing asylum applications if you're already present in the country. So I haven't heard that. I think you can still, the problem is you can't enter anew and file, but you can still file while you're here. Currently, we don't think it's going to affect your ability to apply for a work permit at 150 or 180 days after arrival, but that, again, could change. We'll just see. But I don't anticipate it will change. It is part of a regulation, a part of a law, so they can't easily the president can't easily change that or undo that. And last time, he wasn't able to change or undo that.
Would a church be treated any differently than a business or home or any other place? I'm guessing, Robert, this question is in relation to ICE, but you can leave another comment if that's different.
Yeah, so previously I would say yes, but as of this week, President Trump rescinded I think it's called safe locations, where previously they hadn't really been allowed to go to places of worship or healthcare facilities or schools. Unfortunately, that is no longer the law of the land, and they could enter it. So while I would love to say that it would be treated differently, I don't believe it would be at this moment.
So how will this affect the immigration office currently on North Meridian?
I don't think it will. The immigration office on North Meridian will continue to run. We'll continue to see individuals go for citizenship interviews and potentially interviews related to green cards or their spouses. Interestingly and new on Monday, the immigration court in Indianapolis will actually open. So, and we do have confirmation that's happening. There are 7 judges that are going to sit in immigration court in Indianapolis. They're not all physically present because they're literally moving from other locations. But we do not anticipate that we anticipate that to open and that we'll be able to hear cases here locally. Which is great news. I actually think it's great news for people who need representation because previously our court had been in Chicago. It's much harder as a nonprofit attorney to commit to a case in Chicago when you're going to have to drive 7 to 8 hours round trip versus it's going to be here in the Minton Capehart building down on North Pennsylvania. That's about 7 minutes from Exodus. So that's a little bit easier of an undertaking. So not just us, but other nonprofits and local attorneys will be able to take more cases as well.
Several people have, there's been at least a few comments saying that Andre Carson has a great resource on his Facebook page called Know Your Rights.
This is true, yes. I have seen this and I applaud them. Yeah, and those flyers are they're all kind of the same and they're going around. We also have in our office Know Your Rights cards for individual security. If you have a community that you're supporting and you'd like some cards, we can also make those available to you. They have the individual rights on one side in their language, so Spanish, we have Spanish, Tigrinya, Arabic, Pashto, French, Kinyarwanda, probably more than I'm forgetting.
We're working on also getting these interpreted into a few additional languages that they didn't come in. So we're just waiting on getting those back.
Yeah. So in one side, it's the rights, their right, it says I have the right to remain silent, I don't have to say anything, it reminds them of the rights. On the other side is an indication to the officer that they are exercising their right to remain silent, they'd like to call a lawyer. So it's a card that they can present if they're stopped and say, I don't want to speak to you. I will say the one thing that is important is for individuals to, if they are stopped, to give their real name. Giving a fake name to an officer only adds charges to you of trying to obstruct an investigation. It's not helpful. So if I'm stopped, I'm going to say my name is Rachel Van Tile. I'm not going to say my name is Rachel, middle name Van Tile. I'm going to say my full name, but what they need to know. So if they say, what's your name? My name is Rachel Van Tile. If you don't have a driver's license, trying to give them a fake name isn't going to help you anyway. So you might as well just give them your real name, but then say, I'm now exercising my right to remain silent or handing the card to the officer. Those cards really exist because we know when people are in moments of stress, they sometimes struggle to communicate. I do it if I get really nervous. So we want them to have something that they can physically present to the officer that says, I'm exercising my rights.
Someone asked if we would have those available in Burmese.
Oh, yes,
I think
maybe,
those are...
or we're getting it translated. We're working on it. Yeah, we're working on it for the Burmese community too. And maybe one of the Chin dialects too for our Burmese community. So we're working on it.
Do we know anything about what would happen to those with TPS if they cannot return to where they come from?
So, okay. The TPS recipients could seek asylum if asylum is available. There's also lesser forms of asylum. So like there's asylum, but then there's something called withholding of removal, which says, hey, I can't go back to my country, and it's a little bit less of a burden to show than asylum. That's something they should consult with a lawyer about. But generally, it also depends on the country and whether those countries are willing to take back their citizens. So it depends on that. For example, we really don't deport refugees. Even a refugee that might, 1 in a million that might commit a serious crime, they don't get deported. Unfortunately, they usually remain in jail or in prison for some time. So I don't know exactly, because usually what has happened when TPS is wound down, like when TPS no longer is needed, they do something called deferred enforced departure, where they let people kind of like gather their situation. In many cases, those individuals, like for example, Liberians, they used to have TPS. They did what we call deferred enforced departure for Liberians, and then there was something introduced in Congress and passed called the Liberian Fairness Act, which allowed those Liberians who had been here for many years to obtain a green card. Do I think that that's likely in this Congress, this climate with this president? No, but we'll just kind of have to see what happens as they wind down some of the TPS applications.
We got a question about kind of some of the things the state's trying to do with the Healthy Indiana plan, with HIP insurance, and if anyone with TPS may have their insurance removed. Have we heard anything about that?
I don't, unfortunately I don't have a lot of information about that. We don't know. We do know that the governor and the legislature is trying to reduce the total number of people on Medicaid and HIP, but I don't have a lot of information about that, unfortunately.
So jumping back to those Know Your Rights cards, we have a few more questions, and we have until about 6:30 for this, so I think we can get through these.
Sure.
Have you gotten people who've entered who haven't learned to read in their own language? And if so, is there a way to communicate their rights to those refugees?
That is a great question. Yes. Education is a tool of oppression used by many governments, so they refuse to educate people because, people who can read and write are more dangerous to oppressive governments. So we do Know Your Rights presentations to them. We try to explain that to them. We also usually, I think in that situation, maybe if they had a phone, we could take a picture of it so they could show the officer and try to reiterate that to them in a way that they understood, maybe a voice memo, something like that. So we work with clients in all capacities, and we're here to try to help them.
So if someone is submitting a new asylum application, is it best to do that online or in person at an immigration office? Well,
you never submit applications in person just because they won't take them. They're either mailed in or submitted online. So it would depend on your situation and all kinds of things. That's something that you should consult with a lawyer about where the best place to do that is. Let me take a moment to say we also need to be making sure that individuals are consulting with actual immigration attorneys or accredited representatives, and be very wary of people, even though they may be well-intentioned, of submitting who are not attorneys, who are just trying to help, because it is potentially catastrophic if somebody submits an application that they're not eligible for, and then ICE knows where they are and there's no way to help them. So that's why we will continue to offer our consultations for free. So if they're not sure if this person's a lawyer, you can always Google their name and see if they come up as a lawyer, but also come to Exodus and we'll see if we can help you figure it out.
Okay, I think this is probably the last question we have time for tonight.
Okay.
So this person's saying, like, picturing, like, say, a medical primary care clinic or another place where the doors aren't locked.
Right.
What could the employees at that business do to prevent an ICE officer from barging in?
Yeah, I would assume that you have a front desk, like a receptionist, so making sure that the individual at your front desk is empowered to say, you know, you can't come in here without a warrant, or having somebody to call to come speak if they suspect that somebody is in there with, you know, who's with immigration. I will say, unfortunately, we've heard that immigration is walking around in plain clothes, so they do have to identify themselves if asked, but they don't necessarily have to be in uniform, so you may not see them in uniform either. This is a evolving area. We're doing our best to kind of figure out how to advise people. We ourselves are formulating a plan here at Exodus, and that plan is kind of evolving. So if we do have more concrete information, we'd be happy to share that.
Right. Rachel, as we have a few more minutes, I'm wondering if you could just talk about what our plans are for future presentations like this,
Yeah.
or how, if people are curious, they could learn more.
Yeah, great question. So we did want to talk to you as our community members, but we also want to make sure that we're speaking to our clients and those affected directly. So we will be hosting a couple of Facebook Lives in the coming weeks in, you know, maybe Haitian Creole, in Spanish, and maybe Swahili, things like this. We will be posting those to our YouTube channel as well, so people can access the Know Your Rights presentations ongoing. And we will continue to keep you updated on both our Facebook and our website about any future presentations that we offer for the community or whatever. If your group in particular would like a presentation, you are certainly welcome to contact our Director of Development, and we can, depending on the situation, potentially arrange a speaker for you to come to your organization or group and speak to individuals directly. So.
We're going to just put that contact information in the chat.
Great. Okay, so again, at the end of this, we'll post the slides as pictures so you can see the executive orders, their names, what we think is going to happen, and then we'll also post contact information for the senators and how to find your representative and anything else we promised today. We promised to get it up there for you. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for standing in solidarity with us, with refugees and immigrants in Indiana. So thanks everyone. Bye-bye.